This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first, call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee with your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 an order. Additional terms apply.
Hello.
Dan's coming out to play.
He's coming out to play tonight, yes. Hello, Paul, you well?
Yes, here's a short pass.
Yes, hello there, good morning. Morning, evening.
What have you done with the pass, Andy?
I've received it.
Thank you. And where have you put it?
How do you mean?
Where have you played that ball on the pitch? Where have you placed that pass?
Oh, I think I've just placed it in the top corner.
Fantastic. Great answer. And welcome all to part 7 of the Football Book Corner podcast. And I've called it that because I got locked out, not of my home, but out of Cabbie's Facebook account. And I've had to change things around. Book Corner doesn't exist anymore. So the group that we have and the Facebook page that we have is the Football Book Corner podcast. So it's changed a little bit. It's been mad, and it just seems as though it's been an eternity since part 6. There's been so much going on. But for listeners that don't know or haven't listened before, a brief resume and history about myfootballbooks.com and how you got started, Andy, and your wonderful website, etc.
Thank you, as always, for your kind comments. So I'll give you a brief background. So we started the website, the idea, let's say, 2 years ago on the back of the COVID, on the back of being furloughed. And, the website, myfootballbooks.com, is basically a site of recommended reads and of new releases and books that are coming soon, covering all aspects of the beautiful game, whether it be from the past, whether it be club football, international football, about the fans, about the grounds, the cups, the FA Cup, World Cup, etc. Hopefully it covers, pretty much every area, but it's all the football literature and the great words being written by great authors are out there, all in one place, really. And that was the idea and the thought process behind it, to hopefully give someone a source to go to if they're looking for a new book to read. And as you well know, Paul, there's lots of great material out there and lots of great stories that's always been created year after year of our great game.
Absolutely, and you do recommend a book every week for our weekly podcast, The Curran View, with the Idol of Hillsborough, Mr. Terry Curran. Some of the books that you've recommended, because it's been middle of March since we've done the last one, and now it's almost the beginning of May. You recommended Gimme the Ball by Terry Curran and John Brindley. You also recommended 78, Our Nation Lost the World Cup by Graham McCall. Another book, I'm going through it here, I believe Football Wizard, the story of Billy Meredith by John Harding, you also recommended. Before the Premier League, A History of the Football League, the last decades of that by Paul Whittle. And I am going to be doing a podcast with Paul, who's kindly sent me his wonderful publication. And I love the football, the old leather caser in old money, in between two pictures, two iconic pictures of great stadia. You then recommended Bobby Moore, The Man in Full by Matt Dickinson, and most recently, The Cup by Richard Whitehead, a pictorial celebration of the world's greatest football tournaments. And you also kindly send us an On This Day, so you're very much part of the Curran View weekly podcast as well.
And it's great to be a part as well, Paul. So, great.
Yeah, we're all one team. Where do you want to start this week? Because I've got a bed full of books. I've also just looked at a number of books that catch my eye. We're going to be catching up with Author of the Month shortly. A wonderful book, The Big Fix, a thriller by Jill Morris. So, so a little bit later in the podcast, I'm going to have a chat with Jill. And next month, we're going to be talking to Paul Whittle, who's going to be the author of next month. So probably around end of May, early June.
Yeah.
And it'll be a good time for people that's going away on their summer holidays, sitting around pools, drinking copious amounts of alcohol, and they're going to want a book to read, aren't they? So we're going to be recommending some of those books.
Yeah, you don't blame them after COVID and not being travelling anywhere, so everyone quite rightly is going out and finally putting their feet up abroad. Well, even not so abroad, just at least going on holiday somewhere.
Absolutely. Where are you going? While we're talking on holidays, where are you off to? Have you got anything booked later on in the year?
Only locally. I've got one off to Cape Verde next year. So, around about April time. The holiday that's been cancelled feels like about 3 or 4 years now. So it's been moved. So, off to Cape Verde next year. So that'll be a nice break with the family.
That sounds
But in a few weeks' time, heading down to the lovely part of Salcombe, which is in Devon. So, lovely seaside town. If you've not visited, I recommend it. Very quintessential British kind of seaside town. Beautiful, pubs, etc., and beaches. Lovely.
Sounds great. Beaches and pubs. That really gets my ears pricked up. A book that got my eyes focused, and I did recommend it this week on the Current View. From Beauty to Duty. It's out in August, and it's a football history of Uruguay 1878 to 1918 by Martin de Cruz. Do you know anything about that one?
I don't know that one. When did that come out, sorry, Paul?
It's coming out in August. It caught my fancy the other week while I was trawling through the internet. I mean, there are a number of Tory MPs that are trawling through the internet whilst they're in the Houses of Parliament, but that's for another show, not Book Corner. But no, really, I looked at that because there's lots of books about foreign football nations, Italy, Calcio, and Dirty Angels, about Argentina and Germany tour, and etc., etc., etc. And I've not seen one about Uruguay before. And Uruguay, of course, was the venue of the first World Cup in 1930.
Yeah, that'll be a really interesting read. I think I vaguely remember. Is it coming out through Pitch Publishing by any chance?
Yes, it is. Yeah, Pitch do something.
Yeah, I do. It does ring a bell now. Yeah, I normally only look at books probably 2 or 3 months in advance, but that's later in the year, like you said, August time then. So that'll be a fascinating read. So in terms of the history, like you say, of Uruguay and their early history and being involved in international football. So it'll be a fantastic read.
Absolutely, you can follow Martin de Cruz on his socials and nosing in to when people were engaging with him regarding the book. I do think there might be another book after 1918 to a little bit more up to date and modern day. So watch this space. And another book that really caught my fancy by Aidan Williams, The Neely Men, which is out on Monday, and it celebrates the allure of the greatest teams that haven't won the World Cup. It does say fail to win the World Cup, but I don't like fail because those teams didn't fail. They captured the hearts and imaginations, certainly of me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I've seen that book coming out. Aidan Williams is one of the senior team at the Football Times who have got a number of great writers, haven't they? But it looks a fascinating book. Like you've said, some of those teams that have lost those finals, Brazil sticks out in '82. Uruguay, sorry, not Uruguay, Hungary I always think of, back in Yeah, 54. So you remember those losers, don't you? If you want to call them that, which they are really, in terms of the actual tournament itself. But yeah, they were great teams, weren't they? That just didn't quite get to that last. Achieve what they should have achieved, really.
Yeah, well,
they deserved to achieve.
Not so much Hungary, because it still was the Jules Rimet, of course, in their day.
Yeah.
But Holland and Brazil in '82 failed to. Well, they didn't capture the Jules Rimet, but that was because it was the World Cup, and Brazil captured the Jules Rimet in 1970 when they won it for the third time. And you could argue that Brazil team of '82 and the Dutch team of '74/78 in modern days, because we didn't see the Hungarians. We can read about them in some fantastic books out there to read about the history of Hungarian football. But they really did. As a kid, I remember having pictures of Holland and Brazil on my bedroom wall, and they were, in my eyes, winners.
Yeah. Stellar names, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's 82, Zico, Socrates, the names that just roll off the lips, and obviously Cruyff.
Falcao and Eder and Neyskins of the Dutch, and Johnny Rep and Royce and Renson Brink, and they had Eddie Hahn. They had just so many. Jan Youngblood, the goalkeeper, first goalkeeper I remember heading the ball. There were just so many fantastic teams. So that looks as though it's going to be a tremendous book. It's a book that I haven't got yet. Well, nobody has got it yet, because it does come out on the 2nd of May. And when this broadcast does go out, the book will be published. So get on to that, Aidan Williams, and follow all these guys on the socials. The Nearly Men out on the 2nd of May by Aidan Williams. And you're right, I love the project that these guys, these Football Times, get involved in. It's tremendous. I do call them the educators, and I've done a recent podcast with one of the educators, Gary Thacker, whose book now, Out of the Blue, is on the shelves and on social media and on Amazon and on your site, and don't matter where you get it from, but buy the book. And it relives the story of Chelsea's unlikely triumphs in the season 2011 to 2012, so 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, and that was a fascinating story just in itself, wasn't it? When Villas-Boas was dismissed, wasn't he? I think in the March of that year.
Yeah, it was.
And then obviously Roberto Di Matteo came in, and it's just phenomenal, really. That's against the odds, but winning the Champions League and the FA Cup was it as well?
They did win the FA Cup as well.
Yeah. It's remarkable, isn't it? So probably what's not so remarkable in Chelsea's history is that he was sacked, wasn't he, in November? So that was quickly forgotten about, wasn't it, in terms of that incredible triumph? But that's modern day Chelsea, isn't it? Really, the managers didn't stay for very long.
Well, Chelsea do have a tendency to do that. They're very similar to Watford, but the main difference is Chelsea are very successful. And, I think that lad Carlo Ancelotti, I think he won the double in the season after he was sacked as well. So, Abramovich has been a great owner for Chelsea, and we do look at, up to date now, what's going on. It does look as though they're going to be sold for somewhere in the region of between £3 and £4 billion, which is an astronomical amount of money.
You didn't fancy it then, Paul? You didn't fancy putting a bid in?
Well, I went through my change drawer and didn't quite get enough.
Yeah.
And
I didn't. No,
I phoned up Alan Hudson and says, Uddy, you and Osgood pretty much paid for the East Stand. Do you fancy buying it as well? And we just couldn't raise the money. But there you go.
And it's amazing when you think back to Ken Bates. Didn't he buy it for £1, I think it was?
He did,
somewhere like that. So,
he did.
Wow, how football changes, isn't it? It's incredible.
We were talking on the podcast this week with Terry, and Terry was saying about when he was tapped up by Brian, and they give him £20, and Alan Hudson, when he scored the ghost goal, they were on something like a ridiculous amount for per point. And Webby said, "You're going to tell him that he didn't go in?" He says, "No, we're only on I think it was something like £30 a bonus for a point or a win. He says, no, I had a couple of goals disallowed. Let's leave it there. The referee's always right, and we play to the referee's whistle. But yeah, when you look at today, the amount of coin that goes into, the beautiful game, and I use that word loosely, it is astronomical. And when you look at Manchester United over the last 10 years, have spent more money than any other team. And I watched them against Chelsea the other evening, and you can't see the evidence where that money's been spent. They look absolutely awful. So, money, football has been awash with money in recent times since the advent of the Premier League, but in many instances, not for the better or the greater, you could argue.
No, I agree. It's pretty much 30 years to the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now the Premier League has been in place. So I think it was only, I remember on this day actually, that it was Leeds United that won the last League title, didn't they? Yeah, in 1992.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so coincided with a book that's another interesting read, The Title by Scott Murray, which is the story of the First Division. So for those kids out there that don't realise that football was definitely not invented in 1992, it's much more proud history and longer than that. So one of the books that are just tying quite neatly to that, I'll recommend. It's one that was added on my most recent newsletter. Is actually The Billionaires Club by James Montague.
Yep.
And it's about the subtitle is The Unstoppable Rise of Football's Super Rich Owners. It's got a time. It's been out for a number of years now, but it talks about. Once upon a time, football used to be run by your modest local businessman, didn't it? It used to be run by the local, who owned the local factory, etc. But now it's the plaything of billionaire, oligarchs. Obviously, that's changed with Roman Abramovich. But this book talks about the crisscross of the globe from how the biggest clubs in the world have just been coming into the cog of the global economy, and how football is becoming a central cog of that machine, really. So James Montague, he's a wonderful writer. He's an award-winning author as well. He's wrote a number of books. He writes for the New York Times, World Soccer, amongst others. So it's a fantastic read if you want to really get into some of the analysis around the money that sways around football. So it's a brilliantly researched book. So just segue that in there, as you're talking about that. So that's The Billionaires Club by James Montague.
Well,
fascinating read.
As we're talking about money, on the front of this book, The Big Fix, there's a load of £50 notes. So I think we should have a quick chat with Jill Morris and talk about her book. How was Cyprus, Jill?
Very hot, very nice. Great to get away and get some sunshine after the last couple of years.
Yeah, and what a lovely island as well. And by the way, welcome to Book Corner, the football book corner with Andy from myfootballbooks.com. We do this monthly feature where I pick somebody who is the author of the month. And this month it's you, Jill. Yeah. So for the uneducated, the wonderful book that you sent me, apologies I haven't read it yet, but I must have about 100 football books that I haven't read. It is a standing joke with Andy. Andy will probably read 2 or 3 in the month, and I read a couple of chapters when I'm making a podcast with a player and then have other things to do. So briefly tell us your background and how you got into writing football books.
Okay, so my background is very much marketing, PR background, but within generally retail convenience sector, and also a little stint with Interflora as well. So I've spent a lot of my career actually writing, but very much from a business perspective. But I've always loved creative writing. I've always really enjoyed it from kind of school days, etc. And when the pandemic hit, I was actually doing consultancy work at the time, and that work dried up due to the pandemic. And so I was looking for something else to kind of get my teeth into, keep busy, etc. And I'd always wanted to write a book, so I just began the process at that point, and spent about a good 6-7 months. Managed to get onto initially a pop-up Facebook group called Write That Book, and then joined a masterclass for it as well, where there's lots of like-minded authors, and that just gave you lots of advice as to the everything that's involved with it, because I think writing's kind of just one tiny element of it all.
Now, is this your first football book? I mean, it's a lovely colour. It's a lovely thick book. A matter of life and death, or much more serious. Now, that's got to be a throwback or a kind of tribute to the great and late Bill Shankly when
Yeah.
he come out with a famous quote, "The big fix rather than a little fix or a small fix," and it is a thriller. There's the football, there's the £50 notes, and millions in cash, hundreds of designer watches, a small black book. So it really is encouraging you to get into the pages and turn them over and read them.
Yeah. So it is my debut novel. It's about football because I've loved football all my life. I've been watching Newcastle for nearly 40 years now, but I also love thrillers. So actually, the book appeals to both football fans and non-football fans alike. I think I've had so many comments from people who can't stand football and they've actually absolutely loved the book.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crossed the barrier there for that. But it came from an idea that my husband kind of put forward quite a lot of years ago, which just stuck with me, which was, what if all the results were predetermined at the start of the season?
Do you mean they're not?
Whilst it doesn't go well, yeah, I think there's an awful lot that kind of goes towards fixing certain things these days, let's face it. Things like how do those big matches all fall on one particular weekend, for example.
It's a right shock, isn't it? It's amazing how that computer churns that out.
Truly amazing. But it doesn't quite go that far, but it does kind of have that as the little nugget. And from that, what I've done is developed it into kind of a fictional story of corruption, but where it's set against a backdrop of real football teams.
Yeah, and what you've alluded to is that it appeals to people that don't necessarily like football, but like thrillers.
Yeah, so it has the backdrop of football, and it's looked at very much from the perspective of a football fan as well. So it weaves in kind of the idea of a dad taking his little boy to football for the first time and what that all feels like, and it brings in kind of particular matches from time to time that they attend, which aren't not anything to do with the corruption side of things. It's actually all, again, Brentford is the main protagonist in the story, is a Brentford fan.
What did they do to you then, Jill? Why Brentford?
Well, it's really positive about Brentford, actually. So there's nothing that's saying anything corrupt about Brentford. It's just the guy who actually stumbles across the corruption is a Brentford fan. So it brings in the nice storyline of what football means to fans from their perspective. But then also when he stumbles on the corruption, which is in the Premier League, then he's kind of caught between what's to do for the right thing as a football fan, what's the right decision for him to make, and it's all the kind of intrigue and danger that's set against that.
Yeah, football, when you get into the professional game, I mean, you might not be too far away from the truth there. It is a murky world, and especially with some of the owners that buy the football clubs these days. I'm not having a knock at Newcastle. Good luck to everybody. I'm not particularly bothered. I got bought up. My dad took me down St Andrews. In fact, the first game of football that I watched at Birmingham City was against Newcastle United in 1972, and although I'm a Birmingham City supporter, although many people think that I support the Villa, but I don't. I do have a fondness for all football clubs. In fact, the only club I don't like is Wimbledon. And I'll be honest, we do this on
Yeah.
the Curran View with Terry Curran, and I don't like Wimbledon. I just don't like the way Wimbledon used to play football with Vinnie Jones and all them
Yeah.
thugs. But I've always liked Newcastle. They've always had fantastic supporters. And
Yeah.
growing up in the 70s with Malcolm MacDonald and Pat Howard, I've had the pleasure to interview on
Yeah.
a couple of occasions. So yeah, Jimmy Johnson, Jinky Smith as well. Newcastle
Yeah.
have a fondness in my heart, to be fair, and them Geordies are fantastic.
That's good to hear. My first game was during Kevin Keegan's first season as a player, and I loved him as a player even before he came to us. So the
Yeah.
fact that he came to us in the situation we were in was just brilliant, and he was fantastic for our football club.
Terry Curran was another player that almost joined. I think Arthur Cox had phoned his house and he'd already given his word that he was going to go and sign. It was either Sheffield United at the time or Everton. I can't
Yeah.
remember. But he was going around that time to team up with Kevin Keegan. But what a
Yeah.
fantastic side they had, Keegan, Beardo. And
Oh,
I mean, you've had
yeah.
some great players over the times and
Absolutely.
through the
Yeah.
years. What's the easiest and how is the easiest way for people to hook up with you, Jill, and buy the book, The Big Fix? I love the little calling card that you've got in the book as well. Your little bookmark, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So the best way, or the best copies, should I say, is via my own website. So it's jillmorrisauthor.co.uk.
Yeah.
And if you buy it from there, you can get a signed copy. You can have it personalised if you send me the message that you'd like in there, etc. But it's also available as Kindle and as not as nice a paperback, but still obviously the
Yeah.
same book on Amazon. And then it's in the back page in Newcastle and the Metro Centre, which is a sports memorabilia shop. And I'm looking to get various other stockists as well.
Now, you really have gone to town with it because I'm looking inside the book. There's and then you've got a little calling card as well. So there's a lot of time and effort and money that's gone into developing and making and producing this book. It really is a work of art.
Thank you. It's there is a lot of work involved. I
Mm,
think I briefly mentioned earlier that the writing part is kind of only one small part of
yeah,
it, and actually getting the book out there, especially when you self-publish as
yeah,
well, getting the book out there and getting it to as wide an audience as you can
mm,
is the when the real hard work starts.
yeah.
So I was really pleased recently. I got shortlisted for the Selfies Awards,
Well done.
which is national for self-published books, and it was the top 9 in the country for adult fiction. So I went down to the London Book Fair for that. And had the awards ceremony. Unfortunately, didn't win it, but I think to actually get there is a massive achievement anyway, and especially because I think I was the only author who was there with a debut novel as well.
Yeah.
The rest were quite kind of old hands at doing it all, so I was absolutely over the moon for that.
And dedicated for me mum and dad, because that's a
Yeah,
northern thing, isn't it? In Birmingham, we would say mum, but like up
yeah,
there in the north, it's like me mum, isn't it?
yeah. And sadly, they're no longer with us, and I wish they were,
Yeah,
because I think they'd be really proud and telling all their friends, and
yeah.
I think actually they'd probably be brilliant from a marketing perspective. But my sisters and my wider family have been just amazing as well in that respect. They encourage people all the time, and really push it as much as they possibly can.
I like the way you go. You've got the prologue or the pro. I'm terrible at
Yeah.
English. I am, honestly. Part one, part two. It goes up parts, doesn't it, rather than chapters?
There's chapters as well, but there's specifically like 3 parts to it.
Yeah,
Um, without giving kind of spoilers away
Yeah,
or
we don't want to
whatever.
give nothing away, but Manchester City
Yeah,
get mentioned, and Greater Manchester Police in the prologue get
yeah,
mentioned. There's I'm looking at the 381st page because there's 381 pages, and
yeah,
there's a little bit of an expletive towards the end as well. What the, you know, so there's it looks as though there's room for a follow up, a part two, the big fix
yeah,
part two. You've left it in the air, haven't you?
yeah. There's definite scope for that,
Yeah.
and I really want to do that. I'm working out the best kind of time frame for that, because what I want to do is make this book as successful as possible, first
hmm
of all. Um, and also, one thing that I'm really interested in doing is looking into screenplay for whether it's something like a kind of Netflix
Yeah.
miniseries or even a film. I've had a lot of people who've read it who've suggested that it would work perfectly for either one of those. So I'm just looking at various opportunities on that at the moment.
ITV
So
drama.
yeah, so once I can kind of progress those more, then I'll be looking more into the sequel as well. I've got a lot of people who were asking me for the sequel,
Mm.
but I guess if you keep people hanging on a bit, it just adds to the anticipation, doesn't it?
It does, and the lovely thing is that once you've enjoyed it, there's more. But the amount of times I watch a drama on ITV and think, right, this is the end. I've indulged all my time, effort, and I've loved it. And I go, oh, is that the end? They really have
Yeah.
left it up in the air for another, for a sequel, which is
Yeah.
great. But often when authors are writing books, they're writing it as a trilogy or more, or in different parts. Did you set out to do that when you wrote the book? Thought, do you know what? I could leave this hanging. And I'm not saying that you are or you're not, because
Yeah.
we don't want to give anything away, but there's
Yeah.
always a possibility. But did you write it to actually finish it, or did you think at a stage, do you know what? There's more legs in this.
Yeah. I think initially when I started it, I didn't know how I was going to end it, and
Yeah.
some people are a bit surprised by that. But
Yeah.
actually, I think the more that you write the book and develop the plot,
The
that
hardest thing,
it
Jill, to write an
changes it
ending.
anyway. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't know that until I was really in full flow with writing the book.
Mm.
So it wasn't intentional to say, yeah, there's going to be a sequel. It just
Yeah.
kind of came about the more that the plot developed.
Yeah.
And I'm now I've still got, some ideas in my head for what the sequel is about, and I've got an idea of what the time frame is, and it's potentially during the pandemic and that sort of thing. So it's when, football stadium are closed, and so I've got an idea for that. And even as I think more about that, I wonder whether there's even a third book there.
Of course there is.
So yeah, it's a possibility, but it wasn't something that I set out to do. I wanted to write a book, and the more that I've got into it and done it, I absolutely love this kind of career. So
It's like
it's
a
something
drug, isn't
that I
it?
do want to. Yeah, exactly.
It is, isn't it?
So,
You get sucked into something and you've
yeah,
enjoyed it and you've put all your time, your energy, your effort into this little baby that you've produced, and you
yeah.
think, do you know what? I want to have another baby now, and that's what happens.
It is very much like that, and you meet so many interesting people, and the people are so interested to hear about a book as well.
Yeah.
Even if they might not even be your particular reader,
Yeah.
they just love the fact that you've written a book.
Yeah.
So it's just a great career to get in. I mean, it's not a career that pays enough at the moment. I'm back
Yeah.
doing some consultancy work,
Yeah.
but hopefully in time, who knows?
It's lovely to have that as a hobby, and if that hobby can earn sufficient money to become a career, then that's absolutely fantastic. But most of us that do podcasts or do writing or whatever you do within football, in the periphery of the game, not the billionaires that actually play the game these days,
Yeah,
but we all live in the real world and we have to do another job. But I think that makes it even more special because you're doing it because you want to do it, Jill, aren't you?
Yeah,
You're doing it because you
yeah,
get a buzz and you get a kick. And if then you can develop that into something else, then that's absolutely fantastic.
yeah, definitely. Every kind of event or whatever that I do, or for example today, the interview, I do get a real buzz from it.
Mm.
I did an author evening at York Library recently, and that was just great to kind of talk to people who were interested in hearing about the whole process, about what the future plans are, and all of that. And some had read the book and some hadn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just great. Love it.
And Facebook and Twitter and your social medias, let's give a shout out for that. And we're going to again give a mention to the website that ties everything together, jillmorrisauthor.co.uk, which is where you
Yeah,
want people to visit, where you want them to go. But for them
yeah.
to go there, you need them to go to your Facebook and all your socials, your Instagram, etc., etc. So you give us a shout out to where they can go to initially make contact with you, as I did.
Okay. So the Facebook is Jill Morris Author. Twitter is J Morris Author, and Instagram is Jill Morris Author.
Fantastic. And the more that you write, the more books that you get out, the more that you can go on holiday on that lovely island of Cyprus, Jill. Wouldn't it be
On the
great?
more,
Yeah,
on,
but ain't it
on
great
the
when you
new
do?
European adventures with Newcastle.
Well, yes, you never know now with your very, very rich owners. Newcastle United could be the new Paris Saint-Germain, couldn't they?
No,
But in all
I think
seriousness,
we have an awful lot more history than them, and
well, you do,
which
to be
I'd
fair.
like to
English
think
football
that
does.
the new owners are going to invest sensibly. I think they're going to give us
Yeah.
what we could have had over the last 14 years if we didn't have somebody who wasn't the least bit interested in us as a
Mm.
football club. So I think we're getting some of that investment back that we could have had over that period of time, and hopefully build sensibly towards a better future. But we were in the Champions League not that long ago. We were regularly in Europe,
Mhm.
so I think we have an awful lot more history than Paris Saint-Germain.
They do go back quite a long time though, PSG. I mean, they have got, owners that have got shed loads of money as well, but they have got
Yeah,
a fair history in French football. But
yeah,
Newcastle United, absolutely massive club. And the one difference really for me, I know that the Geordie faithful didn't like Mike Ashley,
no,
and Mike run it as a business, which, to be fair, if I'm honest, I think football clubs should be run a little bit more like businesses. But what they've done, the new owners, they've identified a decent manager. And I think
yeah,
that's the difference. I don't think Newcastle have had a decent manager, arguably, since Bobby Robson and Kevin Keegan. I think they've brought in a number of people that they thought that could do a job. But I do like this fella, Eddie Howe. I think he's a tremendous coach, stroke manager. And I think the first thing that he come in is he wanted to know who he's working with. And I think
yeah,
that's the difference. Some people go in there, you're working for me, and I think Eddie's gone in there. Look, we're all a team. I want to know about you. I want to know about your parents, your partners, etc.,
yeah.
etc. And I think that going in and doing that and doing the legwork, I think there are great times ahead for Newcastle United, as well as great times ahead for you with the big fix. And the nice thing about writing, you can write anywhere. You don't have to be living in a certain place. You can write
Exactly.
with your laptop. You can take it on your European tour with Newcastle United.
Exactly, and
Sounds
it'll
great,
probably
doesn't
give
it?
me some new ideas.
Well, you never know, do you? You never know.
Yeah.
Jill, can I thank you so much for your time? It's been an absolute pleasure. Keep up your great work, and we'll keep promoting and helping you with the big fix that you can
Thanks
get,
so much.
guys. JillMorrisAuthor.co.uk. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you. Take care.
Lovely. Cheers. Ta-ra. Back
Bye.
to you, Andy. Well, thanks so much, Jill, and back to you, Andy. You did put up and post up the other day, because the other day was FA Cup finals of the past, end of football seasons of the past, And there was Manchester United, the big Manchester United book of the 70s by my good friend Roy Kavanagh, a fantastic book. And United in 1974, of course, were relegated. Many people believe that, Dennis Law relegated Manchester United or Stoke City. Yeah. But no, they were already down. Yeah, it was Birmingham City, actually, that relegated them when we won 2-1 against Norwich City. And that was the day of the Dennis Law back heel. But because results went against Manchester United, it didn't really matter what United did that day. They were doomed. But what a fabulous book. And there's some great pictures. I mean, on the front there's Law and Charlton and Best, and on the back a picture of Dennis Law playing against Crystal Palace, the great Martin Buchan, Gordon McQueen, Stevie Coppell, and those were the days with Law, Best and Charlton without a badge. What great kits they were, just a red kit with a white collar.
Yeah, striking, isn't it?
Yeah,
still,
absolutely.
Isn't it? So very simple, but superb. I don't know what the other word is there. So just it's exactly that, isn't it? You don't need the fancy colours. It's just iconic. I think that's the other word as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but those kits. I did like the Admiral kit though of Manchester United.
Oh yeah,
the white one with the black one, and I thought that they were really trendy and really kicking. Because Doherty, although they got relegated, brought them up straight away, and Manchester United really were making inroads into. They won the cup in '77, of course, but to win the league title as well. But sadly, Tommy got sacked after a liaison with the physiotherapist's wife, and to the day that Tommy died, he was still with Mary. But if a case of really, if only, and Alan Hudson always says about with Chelsea, with Tommy, if only. Tommy was one of the great managers of modern times.
Yeah. He was, absolutely. It's a great book, the big Manchester United book of the 70s. It's so brilliantly presented. Legends Publishing is the publishers behind that, and they always produce high quality as well. It's great feel to it. It's great the way it's written as well. It's obviously the season by season, but intertwined in those great images. It's a game by game as well, isn't it? Of those seasons, but great characters as well. And really the ups and downs, really, wasn't it, for Manchester United, of course, throughout that period as well.
Why is a decade in which Manchester United were relegated and won just one major trophy looked back on so fondly by United fans? And that's the introduction, the open to the introduction. And we must give Carl Abbott a shout as well, because it's Roy Kavanagh and Carl Abbott. The foreword by the great Martin Buchan, one of the classiest central defenders to play for the Red Devils, excuse me, and possibly still to this day the only captain to have lifted the English and Scottish FA Cups.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think anybody else really has done it.
No, can't think of any.
No,
certainly not. Excellent.
So what else have you got? Because I'm going to come back to you with another one after your next hit.
Yeah, I'll go back to, you mentioned it. It was on this day, and it's a book that I've read this month, and I know you did a podcast with him as well, Richard Whitehead, the book The Cup. Yeah, I think it's worth another mention as well, because it's. I've read a number of books, I've obviously so many years, etc. And there is the odd book that springs out that just thinks, wow, that's a cracker, that is. And I want to give it a shout out, because it is literally a cracker. It's a brilliant book. I think it ticks all the boxes for me, really, in terms of I love the FA Cup, I love football history, and the FA Cup has got it in, there's so much of it, isn't it? And it's, the 150-year, of course, anniversary. And I was hoping that this, a good book will come out about it. And Richard Whitehead has got it right on the money, kind of thing. And I think you said it in the podcast with Richard. I think in the early part. I know he says it as and it's a pictorial celebration. But it isn't just that. The pictures obviously are fantastic, but it's stories in there as well. Some I knew or some I forgot, etc. But brilliant stories right the way through. And the way it's written as well, it's broken down into certain areas, isn't it? Whether it be about the fans, about the venues, about the managers, the giant killings, etc. But some great stories, great words as well, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So,
and it's a coffee table book, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And it's one that you can dip into and dip out of and read the back as probably even before the front, because it's in no fixed order. It's, as you say, it's in different segments of different features of the FA Cup over the 150 years, and it's a fantastic read. I've dipped into it. Jamie Vardy on the front there with Sunderland, of course, in 37. And it is it's fantastic and a wonderful podcast with Richard. What a top man, what a knowledgeable person. So highly recommended, and check out the podcast that we cut together.
No, your podcast is brilliant. I think it's described it perfectly, kind of thing, in terms of for people who maybe see it and think it's just a big pictorial celebration. That's just the start of it. It's just really great. It is literally almost, even if you're not a fan of football, I think it's almost a kind of when you read through it, it's like a history of British society almost in many ways, kind of thing. It's just the way it's presented. Yeah, fantastic, really good. So I definitely wanted to give that a shout out. It goes right up there in I don't know, I'm probably saying, but at least the top 20 books of all time. 20 books, I'd say it's that good. It's really, really good.
And you read so many books. I mean, I probably haven't read 20 my entire life. I've done a recent podcast with John Giles, and John's got it's a book that came out some time ago, A Football Man, the autobiography. I cut a lovely podcast with John, which is out on all of our socials, SRBMedia, or my 70s, Legends of the 70s podcast on Facebook or Twitter. And I actually got to page 108. You'd be very proud of me. I've half read the book. But
excellent.
As always, what I do, I go on to do another podcast, and I just don't have time to read all these books. But it is a great read, and I like to, because with John, I know a lot about what he did when he was at Leeds United, of course, growing up in the 70s. But his early years, I do like to read up on the early years, and it was a great podcast. I mean, John is such a great talker and such a fantastic player, and you wouldn't think, because John had got a little bit of reputation, and we did cover that, but it was football really that made him have that reputation. But what a soft-spoken, wonderful gentleman. And it's probably something that would surprise a lot of people when they listen to John talk, and also listen to John sing. He's got a decent voice. And I did say after a Bacardi and Coke, and he says, I've got to stop you, Paul. Several Bacardi and Cokes.
Excellent.
And get it on. I've done a recent podcast with John Sperling, how the 70s rocked football, as we're talking about John Giles in the 70s.
Yeah, I've just not quite finished it, reading that book at the moment. Yeah, get it on. So, again, another absolute cracker, isn't it? I love the way it's been set out in terms of how it's broken down as well. It's very clever how he's done it. So, but I just even loved right from the start. There's a few quotes at the very front. I've got it here in front of me. You got a quote from George Best. This is him speaking in 2004, and he says, "One time, I had a great night in the casino, cashed in all my chips, shoved my winnings into a paper bag, and the next morning I walked straight into a car showroom where I bought a brand new Jag in cash." And that's not a normal thing to do.
But George Best wasn't a normal person.
No, he wasn't. But it just sets the scene for that book. So, and obviously it's got a forward by the great Barry Davies as well. So, which is one of the great commentators. Whenever I think of Barry Davies, almost now I could hear the one where I think Francis Lee scored
Oh,
he says,
yes.
"Look at his face. Just look at his face."
Yeah,
He has some great lines, didn't he?
there's
Barry
some
Davies.
iconic lines, isn't it? And that one with Franny
Yeah.
was great because Francis was playing for Derby. He won the Football League Championship in 1975 after Manchester City had sold him to Derby, and he scored against Manchester City. So, and you could see it on his face, and that's the job of the commentator. Look at his face. Just look at his face. And what an iconic player as well. Francis was another star of the 70s. I've just recently purchased another couple of books of the 70s, Rodney Marsh and Charlie George, again in my library. One of these days I may well get round to reading them. But you know the way I look at it? I look at it like this, Andy. When they wrote a book many years ago, there isn't going to be many books left in circulation. So if I go onto a site and I see that there's one to purchase, I go and purchase rather than they're all sold out and there's no books to purchase, because sometimes you don't have a rerun. So with all these great players, I get them, I put them in my library, and if I do retire one of these days, I'm just going to sit down, just drink all day and read books.
You're right, though. There's many great books that come off the top of my head. You can't buy anymore.
No, exactly.
You know, you can't buy. You can buy them through the likes of eBay, etc., and places like that. So you can get used actually through Amazon as well. But some of them you're paying more than you can pay a fair whack if it's a really popular book.
Oh, you pay a couple of £100 for some of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, the prices that you pay. So I have a look. Is there a book about? Yes, there is. How much? All right, that's decent. I mean, I did purchase Peter Doherty's autobiography from 1947, but, I mean, sadly that didn't arrive. But, you know, these things happen.
Yeah.
And Andy Gray's book, Grey Matters, that never arrived as well. But generally speaking, they do arrive, and I spend an awful lot of money on football books that I don't read. What else have you read this month? Because I have read about 23 pages of Get It On. And I did read all those pages of John. Yeah.
What also, just on the, funny you should mention Francis Lee. It's his birthday today, by the way. So,
happy birthday, Francis.
Francis Lee, he's, I think it was born on 29th of April 1944. So, I thought I'd mention that. So,
that makes him old.
That's it. So, just by coincidence, I mentioned him. So, So, another book I recommended in my recent newsletter. So, alongside the Billionaires Club that I mentioned earlier. This is slightly different because it's not your traditional book, but it's the Got Not Got Football Gift Book.
Yeah, there's lots of them, isn't there?
Oh yeah, and it's by the great Derek Hammond and Gary Silke. Now I think they're a publishing company, Conquer Editions.
Yes.
But this particular one is brilliant. It's the subtitle, Every Fan's Catalogue of Desires, and it's basically it's a nostalgic look back through all those collector's items. So obviously you've got your Subutio, you've got when you used to have footballers on cereal boxes.
Yep.
Got great images in there. Great kits, like you talked about the Admiral one as well, and the various merchandise. And do you remember collection coins as well?
Yes, I certainly do.
Yeah. You remember them? So you got a collection like the World Cup 1970. So a lot of people used to collect them, etc. But your Panini stickers are mentioned in here. But it's one of those. It's a brilliant book. You can just sit and look at the pictures throughout it, and you're just lost in time, really.
They did one for the 72 Centenary Cup final as well, didn't they?
Yeah,
they did coins for that as well.
Yeah, no, there's lots of reminiscing in this book, so I recommend that. Yeah, definitely. If you want a bit of, if you don't want to do some reading the words, just look through it, the pictures, etc. It's brilliant, really good. Another book I mentioned was one of my other, because I recommend 3 recommended reads, was Quiet Genius, Bob Paisley. About Bob Paisley, sorry. So written by Ian Herbert. It's a great read, and and about a great. Well, he was a quiet man, wasn't he, in the flat cap, who swept domestic European opposition aside, and arguably produced one of the greatest teams that Britain's ever known. So his record, 20. He recorded 20 honours in 9 seasons. That includes 6 league titles, 3 League Cups, 3 European Cups, UEFA Cup, Super Cup. And the fact that he took over from Bill Shankly, I think Shankly just won the 1974 FA Cup final in Liverpool.
Yeah.
To follow up with someone like a messiah like Bill Shankly. When you think of how many people have tried to follow Alex Ferguson, at Old Trafford, no one's got close, have they? And the fact that Bob Paisley came in after Shankly and was managed to go on and arguably do even better. I know from reading the book, obviously Paisley was quite reluctant to take on the reins, and he tried to persuade actually Shankly to change his mind. Even though Shankly did regret it later in life, he was not paternal at that time. But it was just, it's a great read. Quiet Genius is what it's called, about Bob Paisley. British football's greatest manager by another great writer, Ian Herbert. So. And it was shortlisted for the William Hill Sports Book of the Year back in 2017. So it's been out for a few years now. But that's a really good book I'd recommend out there. Quite genius. So
absolutely. And I think it was
what a great manager.
Yeah, I think it was Matt Busby that helped to bring Bob to Liverpool, as he did with Billy Little as well, because Matt was there at Liverpool, and it was a toss-up really whether he was going to be a coach at Liverpool or a manager, literally a manager of Manchester United, where he was allowed to not just create a team but create a club. And there's a wonderful book by Leo Monaghan, The Three Kings, and a DVD by Johnny Owen, Busby, Shankly, Steen, the makers of modern football. And I've just had the pleasure of cutting a podcast with Leo. And I have already, probably 18 months ago, cut a podcast with Johnny Owen as well. So I've got both the book and the DVD. Oh, absolutely. I mean, those 3 were kings, and they were the makers of modern football. I know that there is a book about, I won't buy it, I won't give it a mention, because it is about 1992, the makers of modern football. I'm sorry, you didn't make modern football in 92. You stole football in 1992. These fellas made it in 92.
Yeah, they'll get me started. I was reading an article just earlier today when I was thinking back to that book, The Billionaires Club.
Yeah.
Because we're changing the format of the Champions League, aren't we, from next season or the season after, where they're getting introduced in this kind of, where if there's a club that's won it recent history, they'll be automatically able to qualify for the Champions League. But even that, the history is based on the last so many years. You're not going back to your Aston Villas, your Nottingham Forest, that won it in the 70s. It's just absolutely, talk about just enraged with how football is nowadays. I don't know if you've seen the story. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to. They're revising basically how the tournament works. So it's just this time last year there was an absolute outrage about European Super League. Sorry, I'm going off on one. But
no, you're absolutely right, Andy, because this is the European Super League by stealth.
Yeah.
That's what they done when they started the Champions League. They want to have the cake and eat it, and then they get managers like Klopp, etc., that moan about they play too many games. They do not play too many games domestically. They play too many games internationally and in European competition, but they never have a moan about that, because they will not. They will never bite the hand that feeds, and it is immoral. They're trying to rewrite all the history books, and I will get those books of modern day football and throw it on a funeral pyre.
I don't blame you. It just absolutely rages me, some of the things that talk about modern football. And there is certain books like the ones you mentioned, I've got to I can't even bother wasting my time reading it, to be quite frank.
No,
it's just
nothing I'd want to read.
It's just such a short visit, kind of thing. I know you might, I don't know, sometimes you might sound a bit bitter, kind of. When I was younger, people would say football was better in my day, kind of thing, but honestly, it really was better in my day. I don't know how else to put it. So, don't get me wrong, actually, the quality of the football, sorry, I'll backtrack a little bit. The quality of football is, it's amazing, isn't it? Some of the football
some
you
of
watch
it is,
Liverpool,
yeah.
Manchester.
Some of it is, yes,
so
absolutely.
It's no real better than it was, kind of thing, but also, the whole, that European Super League, when I saw that, because it's going to happen, isn't it?
Of course it will.
That these bigger clubs based on their recent history of just absolutely bonkers. The fact that fair play, they talk about fair play. I know it's talked about in UEFA. Where's the fair play of that? Still interested talking about fair play. It's literally about the big clubs.
Fair play doesn't exist. It's about getting the maximum coin that they can for the big clubs, and it will happen, the European Super League. I don't care how they wrap it up or in what paper they wrap it up in, but it will be. And we will probably not you, but I'll probably be dead by the time that it starts. So it's one of them arguments. I go, do you know what? He was right. But it's one of them that you can, no, it'll never happen. You can never say never, because football is all about money and greed these days. Yeah. But we like to stay in the ballpark of when football was the beautiful game. And another book I want to give a mention to is The Armistice Day Killing by Colin Browne. It's a dramatic story of the death of the only English professional footballer deemed by law to have been murdered, a key member of Aston Villa's 1923 All-Star team, Tommy Ball. And I have that on order, so I'm looking forward to receiving that, because that's what I like to look at, and not so much read, but look at the pictures.
That looks a fascinating story, that does. So I have no idea of that story at all, but it looks, it's again coming out by Pitch, isn't it? Pitch Publishing.
Absolutely.
So Colin Browne. In fact, he's from Saltney in Birmingham.
I have no idea, but I'm going to get hold of Colin and do a podcast with him. I mean, he don't know that yet, but he will. But I mean, and again, I get called. I get called all things, to be quite truthful. But most people think I'm a Villa supporter, but I'm not. I'm obsessed with football.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Football and the history of Aston Villa, I think, is fantastic. They're a founder member of the Football League. McGregor was deemed the father of the Football League. I think Villa Park is the most fantastic football ground in the Football League. And the history of Villa, I think, is something that is on my doorstep, and I like to have a look at and make podcasts, and with former players. I've done one with Tony Morley, with Peter with Brian Little, with Sir Dennis, and we've covered a lot of ground, from Villa winning the league, winning the European Cup, and some of those glory nights, Andy Gray being another one, when they absolutely smashed Liverpool in 1976-77 season when they won the League Cup. but we're very close to winning the treble. And had they have beaten Birmingham City, my team, they would have, or they could have won the league, because you've got another 4 points there, so you're playing from a different position, i.e. when you score a goal, you're more buoyant. When you concede the goal, it's a different reflection of the game that unfolds, and I think it's the same as with the season. When you've got them points on in the bag, you can play a little bit more flamboyantly. But there are many Villa supporters that would say that 76-77 season, Villa played the best football ever.
Yeah, well, I've got a fabulous history, haven't I, Villa?
No,
so,
absolutely.
And again, when you mentioned Villa Park, again, if we want to remember this as well, that should still be an FA Cup semi-final venue, but there you go.
Well, it would be if the Premier League didn't steal the soul out of football, because if the FA had any backbone, they would still play the semi-finals at iconic stadia like Villa Park, like Hillsborough. Okay, we had that in '89 with the Hillsborough disaster, but I think that cup semi-finals should be played on neutral grounds, and when you get through to Wembley, that is the magic of the cup. You play the final after the season has finished, and that brings the curtain down on the domestic football season. I don't like this. You've got a full league programme while the FA Cup final is being played overnight. It does my head.
No, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. So, could I just mention then too, because you mentioned that book, The Armistice Day Killing, that comes out in May. There was one that came out this month, again, it's Aston Villa related actually, so just to segue that in. It came out this month, in April. It was The Life and Death. I think we mentioned it on our last podcast. The Life and Death of Andy Ducat by Jonathan Norfolk. That's I've not read it myself yet, but it looks a fascinating, captivating biography of one of England's earliest sporting heroes. So, but he, in football terms, he captained Aston Villa to FA Cup glory in 1920. So he may well know actually about Tommy Ball, who's that book that we just referred to, The Armistice Day Killings. He was a key member of the team a few years later in 1923. But Andy Ducat, he was one of the select band of men who represented England at both football and at cricket level as well. And as well as playing for Aston Villa, he made Arsenal's greatest 50 players, greatest ever 50 players. And he scored more than 20, this is in cricket terms, not goals, 23,000 first-class runs, and he played for Surrey. I think, ultimately his death was untimely in 1942 whilst he was playing at Lord's. That's it. So, looks a fascinating read, that particular one by Jonathan Norfolk.
Absolutely.
Mention that one.
And Richard Whitehead has a fantastic connection to that book as well, because Richard is a massive Villa supporter. Richard Whitehead knows everything about football, and when I was having a chat with him before, the man is an encyclopedia. He is one of the go-to people in football. What Richard doesn't know isn't worth knowing, and he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about football. And that's what I love about what we do, talking to football people that write books. And if it wasn't for people like Richard and John Sperling and all the other authors and writers that we mention, our game would not be able to be passed on to the next generation, because in many cases we didn't see those players play, but we can read about them, and they bring these people to life. And thank you all to all the football authors and writers for doing that and educating me. I've learnt so much from you all. The one and only Jimmy Greaves by Norman Giller, another one, Giller the Filler. Phenomenal writer of football. Again, Norman has forgotten more than what I'll ever know. The authorised biography by the man who knew him best. I mean, Norman knows absolutely everything about Tottenham in particular, England, Jimmy Greaves. football per se is an absolute beast. And writes for Back Pass magazine, and the most recent issue 79, I have it here, and it's the Professional Football Association back it as well, and on the front is the iconic picture in 1956 of Tom Finney at Stamford Bridge called The Splash. I believe outside Preston North End's ground there's a statue of that. And when you look at that picture of The Splash, it really is a splash. It's arguably the most iconic football photograph ever, and it was photographed the year in 1956.
Yeah, excellent. Jimmy, just going back to Norman Gillier, so do you know what I saw about he's bringing the book out, The One and Only Jimmy Green's, and his autobiography. He was a good friend of Jimmy Green's Wild Accounts as well.
Yeah, it was.
Did you know how many books, I saw it said about the author, do you know how many books Norman Gillier has actually written?
Giller's gone over 100.
Yeah, 118.
Yeah, he's gone over 100.
Books.
I know the bloke's a beast.
I struggle to write 118 sentences, let alone books.
Andy, I couldn't write 118 words. Giller is an absolute beast. I mean, again, he's another Paul Trevelyan. I've cut a recent podcast with Paul about sock tags and his book about Leeds United, a massive Tottenham fan. Another wonderful 2 hours of talking to Paul Trevelyan. Football is littered with so many intelligent and interesting people that have wonderful stories and write wonderful stories about the game of football. And, I can only bow down to their superior knowledge. I wish I was half the person that they are.
Absolutely. Well, one that's making his debut in books, and again about football history, is a book that's coming out that I'll mention. It's called The Shadow. I hope I pronounced it correct, but it's In the Shadow of Ben Bulben. And it's about Dixie Dean when he played at Sligo Rangers. Yeah. So it's by a guy called Paul Little. He's an Irish freelance writer making his debut as a solo artist in the world of books. But basically, in January 1939, just months after hanging up his boots, and a few weeks into his new career as a talent scout, William Ralph Dixie Dean, to give his full name, received a surprise request assist from the far west of Ireland. Could he find the goal scorer of Sligo Rangers? So it looks a really fascinating story into, an absolute legend of the game, isn't it? Dixie Dean. So obviously, a legend very much so at Everton and at Goodison Park. So that's an interesting book that's coming out. And again, it's as it says here, it's a romantic tale of divine intervention, uncanny time and drama on and off the pitch. It's the tale of Dixie Dean's 4 months with a bit of red that was to leave an indelible mark on the player, the club, and the town. So that's Dixie Dean at Sligo Rangers. Sligo Rovers. Again, coming out by Pitch Publishing.
Yeah, it's one that has caught my eye. It's a lovely cover as well, isn't it? It's a really interesting cover. And, of course, Dixie, one of the few players that have scored over 300 goals. So when you wear this on Talk Sport, he scored 100 Premier League goals. Well done. Congratulations. You got another 200 to get on the same table as the great Dixie Dean, where, one of the all-time greats. And sadly, one that's often overlooked and forgotten. And let's not forget the fact that Dixie once scored 60 goals in a league season, darlings. He beat George Canswell's record of 59, although it was second division. And when Paul Trevelyan asked Dixie about his thoughts going into that game, Dixie, will you score a hat-trick? Because he scored a hat-trick against Arsenal on the final league game of the season to overtake that. I'm going to leave the answer to you must find the podcast, because Paul Trevelyan articulately puts it, very articulately, how the great Dixie Dean answered that question, and it's absolutely phenomenal, and in a way that only Dixie. And he also then took the spirit of Dixie to Don Revie, and And again, another story. So great podcast. Don't listen to me when I'm talking. Cut that bit out. Just listen to them. They're the intelligent people. I just hold the microphone, or sorry, the phone, and just prompt them to get these stories out of them. The Last Busby Babe by Wayne Barton is another book that's took another book that I've got, the autobiography of Sammy McElroy, MBE.
Yeah, that's it. That came out back in March, I think, was it, last month? So, looks, again, I think we've mentioned it before, haven't we? Wayne Barton is a prolific writer in his own right. What he doesn't know about Manchester United is not worth knowing. Yeah. So, and what a great player he was as well, Sammy McElroy.
Absolutely. So, and played at Stoke City towards the end of his career with Alan Hudson. Uddy had come in. Mickey Thomas had been sold. Uddy come in, and Sammy, after a game of five-a-side, said to Uddy, "Thank God you've arrived. We've never played football like that for some time." And what a player Sammy was. They had a decent team. I think they had about 7 international football players, and I think they were bottom of the league when Uddy arrived. Played his first game against Arsenal with a banner that read "Welcome Home, Huddy," a podcast that I've done about the 83-84 season, I think that was. Right. And Alan Hudson goes through it, and Sammy McElroy is a part of that, and the Last Busby Babe. And of course, no, Sammy wasn't a Busby Babe as such when we look at the Babes.
Yeah.
Johnny Giles was, or rather John Giles was, when he did join Manchester United. They called him Johnny, and he told his mum, and they said, "Well, don't answer him, John. Your name is John. It's not Johnny. His name's John Giles." It was only when he joined Manchester United that they called him Johnny. Johnny was there in the time of the Busby Babes, but it was Matt Busby. It was his last signing. Matt actually signed Sammy McElroy, and that's why it is The Last Busby Babe by Wayne Barton. Johan Cruyff by A.K. Koch. I hope I've got his name right. The biography, Always on the Attack. There's so many books about Johan Cruyff. What makes this one different? Do you know much about it?
I don't know. No? It's coming out again. That's coming out in a couple of months' time, isn't it? In June. So, I don't know much about the author either. So I've looked at he's written several bestsellers about he's from the Netherlands. So he's written several bestsellers about him. He's won a number of prizes. It should be an interesting read. There's been a number of books about Cruyff, I think I like I'll put it up actually. There's a subtitle about how it's written. It says, "Argumentative, brilliant, arrogant, visionary. Johan Cruyff was one of the greatest footballers of all time." So it'd be an interesting read. Another aspects from the biography of his life. It'd be interesting to see. But no, I don't know much about the author. But apart from he's obviously a good writer. Looking back at what he's done, so
absolutely
knows his stuff.
And I think what we'll do on our next podcast, that probably will coming out round about June, about that time, we'll have a look at some of the books about Johan Cruyff, because Johan was one of the great players of all time, and his autobiography, My Turn, come out a couple of years ago. There are a number of other books, so we'll give a shout out to and make Johan Cruyff the focal point of part 8 of our monthly or bi-monthly podcast, Andy. Next up, The Story of Don Howe by David Tossell. Hero in the shadows through interviews with players, colleagues, friends and family. This book examines the triumphs and challenges of Don Howe's career and assesses his contribution to English football. The one word that would spring to my mind when somebody mentions the word Don Howe is legend. And somebody did say to me, "Is any related to Eddie Howe?" And if you do go on Google search engine or others, it does say that it's his son, but it ain't. I phoned up Al. I said, Al, are they related? He says, "Paul, how long have I known you? Do me a favour." Of course they're not bloody related. No.
No, I didn't think so. But we had a number of books going in, and I saw that someone references as well, actually, on Twitter. Don Howe's mentioned a lot of other people's books. He had a lot of influence on a lot of people.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, over the years. It's remarkable, really, to be honest. So, it's probably, I'm surprised it's probably taken so long now to see a book very much focused on him. So, and David Tossell was a great writer as well. But, yeah, he's one of England's, English football's great coaches, isn't he? So, obviously he helped. Well, he was the right-hand man to 3 England managers. In 82, he helped when, obviously, England were unbeaten in that World Cup, weren't they? So they played 5 games, didn't they, in total? It was a slightly strange format at the time, wasn't it? The 82 World Cup. Yeah. Well, they got through to that second stage, and they didn't even concede a goal, if I remember rightly, did they?
I think we drew 0-0 with Spain in our last game. Brooklyn and Keegan, I believe, were on the bench. Kev wasn't fit, but again, England managers have always done that. Ron Greenwood done that. Bobby Robson replicated it with Browne Robson in 1986. We've done it with Michael Owen. We've done it with Wayne Rooney. We do it throughout the ages with our best players. And if they ain't fit, they ain't fit. It ain't going to happen no matter how much you want to wrap it up. But Don Howe, absolute legend. In fact, Alan Hudson, Huddy does not like coaches. If Alan Hudson was to write a book on coaches, it wouldn't be very thick. But it would be about one coach, and that's Don Howe. He loved Don. Don gave him a bit of a bollocking, actually, after the 78 FA Cup final, or rather before, I think it was. It was before the game. Because on the night of the game, the press liked to see who was in the team. And it got leaked out that Alan Hudson was starting, and they printed it. Uddy was just having a chat with the journalist friend, and Don wasn't happy. Don wasn't happy with him. And the journalist phoned up and he says, "Look, I apologise, Don. It wasn't Alan's fault. It was my fault." And then Don called it for a steward's inquiry as to what went wrong in the 78 FA Cup final. He called it at Highbury on the Monday after, and he went through the team, started with Pat Jennings, went through to the defensive players, got through to Alan Hudson. "You've always got something to say for yourself, Huddy. What do you think?" And he said it was his fault, pointing at Terry Neal. He picked the wrong team. Terry Neal jumped over the physio's table. The players just about kept them apart. The meeting was finished. They went out and done a training session, and the players were patting Huddy on the back, saying he deserved that. We all wanted to say that about him and to him, but none of them. And this is what happens: they will say things in the dressing room, but they won't actually say it to the manager. But Huddy did. As a consequence, he was on the run from Terry Neal. And if Don Howe would have come to Arsenal earlier or been there when Huddy arrived, Alan Hudson would have stayed at Arsenal. And arguably, Arsenal, had they have had Ball, Brady and Hudson, could have rewritten English football history.
Yeah, they could have, absolutely. And Howard, he was part of the Arsenal team when they won the double, didn't he, in 71. So he played a crucial role in that part as well. And interesting, actually, something I didn't realise when I looked at the synopsis of the book, he was also he was assistant to Bobby Gould, when Wimbledon went on to that shot win in 1988. So it's just amazing, isn't it? How one coach, over a span, what you're thinking about 71 to 88, 17 years, and, and influencing the 82-86 World Cup in between. It's amazing, isn't it? Such one man had such influence on English football. It was incredible, Don Howe.
Absolutely, really what a great man, and
absolutely.
And, as I say, Uddy doesn't speak that highly of coaches, but he does of Don Howe. You mentioned
that says it all, then.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the title by Scott Murray, The Story of the First Division. That's another book that I wanted to briefly talk about. It was in my list to talk about. Another one, Sexton for God by Tim Rolls, looks at how he brought cup glory to Chelsea, and the game's played under Dave Sexton in the from 1967 to 71 period. I mean, Al always says that Dave was a great coach, but not a football manager, and being a manager really was Dave Sexton's downfall. I know he done reasonably well at QPR, but I think that if you look at Dave's career, he would always be renowned more as a coach, because we were talking about coaches with Don Howe, and I think Dave Sexton was one of the great coaches. In fact, when Ron went to Aston Villa, he had Dave Sexton as a coach with Villa, working with the kids, which was something that when Ron went to Villa as a young kid, it was the great Jimmy Hogan that was Ron's first coach, and then when he went from intermediate to reserve team, and the step up with the other coach with the old flat cap, he'd go, forget what Tip Tap's told you, just give it some altitude. So there's different levels of coach. I think Sexton was a great coach, but I would question his managerial credentials.
Yeah, he started off as a coach at Chelsea, by all accounts. So before he moved on to his manager career, started at Leyton Orient. And then went on. So obviously won the European Cup Winners' Cup with Chelsea.
71, yeah.
71, yeah, absolutely. Just going to mention another coach while you're talking to coaches as well. A book that did come out last month is Tony Carr. This is a lifetime football at West Ham United. So, and this is a book I was sent to me by Icon Books, the publishers. Tony Carr again is one of these. Basically he played, and then he had a short football career. Played alongside the likes of Bobby Moore, but then moved into coaching at quite a young age. But he was estimated to produce talent worth an estimated 80 million. Now this is not my modern day kind of numbers, but 80 million in transfer fees, which included the 23-man England squad for the 2010 World Cup, included no less than 7 players. They were Rio Ferdinand, Frank Lampard, Joe Cole, Michael Carrick, Jermaine Defoe, Glenn Johnson, John Terry. So, there's a lot of money there in modern days. But even now, I know we're talking 10 years ago, but as we all know, money's even gone even more mad in that short period. Tony Carr, that's his book that came out last month. So, his boyhood dream was signing for West Ham United, and obviously training alongside Bobby Moore, etc. That's his book. So unique career. Where he really honed his craft in the coaching world.
Absolutely. Obrigado, a football epic by David Kilpatrick, is another book I want to give a little mention to. Do you know much about that book or about David?
No, it doesn't. Off the top of my head, no. If I'm honest, Dave. Paul, sorry, no, I don't really ring about too much, sorry. What was the book, sorry? I didn't quite catch you then, sorry.
Obrigado, a football epic by David Kilpatrick. David did engage with us on Book Corner on Twitter. I do like to engage with authors, and we will give your books a shout out. Yeah. So David did, and we've just given it a shout out. Obrigado, great name, Obrigado.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know what it means, but it's a lovely word, isn't it?
It sounds a good one. Yeah, I recognise his name, so I think you might have contacted him yourself as well. So I'll certainly give it a look. So we'll give him a shout out as well.
Absolutely. Well, that exceeds my capabilities and the 15 books that I had written down. What else have you got for us? And I do like the fact that when Saturday comes and Backpass Magazine and World Soccer and lots of other publications give out a couple of pages to promote football books. So, the more people that are promoting the books, the better. Yeah,
definitely. No, I'll give a few shout out to some books I've received as well. The one I've got here is Barcelona, but it's about the greatest day in the history of Rangers. FC. So Barcelona, when they won the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1972. So it was quite a good timing as well. I think I'm sure the deal for Tom Miller planned it quite well, didn't he? Considering Rangers are in the semi-final, aren't they? I forget the names of the tournament now. The Europa League, isn't it?
Yes, they're playing at Leipzig. I mean, in them days, it would have been Lokomotiv Leipzig, but it's RB now.
Yeah.
It's Red Bull. It's slightly different. Germany, it's one united country, whereas I believe Leipzig was in the east, wasn't it?
I think it was. Yeah, absolutely. So
Leipzig was.
But this is 50 years on then. So 2022 will mark the 50th anniversary of the greatest victory in the history of Rangers Football Club. What was interesting when I was doing a bit of research around this particular book is that I forgot they played their final in 1967, 5 years before. It was either on the same night, or was it a few days before, when Celtic famously won in Lisbon in 1967 against Inter Milan. I don't recall that it was such a short time frame between those two playing. Well, Rangers were in the UEFA Cup, it would have been then, and then Celtic played in the European Cup just a few days later, which is remarkable, isn't it? Really,
it certainly is. I mean, the Lisbon Lions. I mean, arguably the greatest achievement ever by a British football club. Bobby Lennox was an outsider. He was a foreigner. He was born in Ayrshire, but all the rest of the fellas born within 10 mile of Paradise Parkhead. Incredible.
It's
a feat
amazing.
that will never be replicated.
It is phenomenal when you think about, we've talked about modern day football, etc. They pull from all over, all parts of, well, not just the country of Europe and the world, but they pulled it from the area in and around Glasgow, weren't they? And it's just remarkable, isn't it? They went to the right from the top and won the European Cup. It's a remarkable story, isn't it? That particular one. But that's the book. Tom Miller, Barcelona. It's by Black and White Publishing. Another shout out for a book I received is Aberdeen FC. This is by Peter Elliott. Yeah, and it's one very much for fans of football programs. And as I'm sure you know, lots of people love the football programs and still collect them now. And this is a definitive guide for Aberdeen home programs during the 1980s. So arguably, probably their greatest time in their history, isn't it, Aberdeen? Is again linking it to European when they won it in 1983. I'm thinking off the top of my head, it was in Gothenburg, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was round about that time, and you could argue that was, that really catapulted Ferguson into the limelight, and was one of the reasons that probably was the reason that he got the Manchester United job following Ron Atkinson in 1986. But when you look at the stronghold of Scottish football, and you just alluded to Celtic and Rangers both being European competitions and winning respective competitions, Celtic and Rangers have always been the dominant force, and for a period of time, Aberdeen got in between them, and Ferguson, being a former Rangers man as well, was a fantastic feat, and again probably a feat that will never ever be repeated.
Yeah, well, sadly the gap is forever as well. It's always a big gap, isn't it? Which is a shame, isn't it? Really, right at the top. But that's the way English football seems to go at the moment with Liverpool and Manchester City. But anyway, hopefully not too much. So you see, like Bayern Munich winning again for 10 years, on the top, didn't they, the other day? The Bundesliga. So going back to this book, Aberdeen. This is about football programs, and I love football program designs as well over the years. So everyone loves a football program. If you've not been to a game for a while, you tend to pick up the program, don't you? And you can find out what's happening in the club. what have you. So this is certainly a book for fans of programmes, certainly for Aberdeen FC.
Absolutely. No, I think the programmes in them days were probably only about 10 pence, wasn't they? Whereas now they're about £3.5, £4, and now some of them might be a fiver or more in certain parts of the country. But I do believe programmes these days have got more input from fans, etc.
Yeah.
They do tend to incorporate a little bit of the wisdom of the fanzine rather than back in probably the 90s. And certainly when the Premier League had started, there's so much commercialism and just corporate sponsors, and it was almost like one of these circulars that you get through the door where you look at it's your local magazine. It's not. It's just advertising various trades. But I think there's a little bit more content these days in football programmes.
Yeah, you're right, though. I remember when I picked up your football program, it was all the local companies, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't it, in the area? Right down to the local painter and someone would come round and do your plumbing, etc. Just looked at the prices of the programmes, actually. So I was just fascinated to have a look. So in 1980, the Aberdeen programme was 30p. By the end of that century, by the end of that decade in 1990, it got up to 70p. So it hardly changed, had it, in 10 years, but it's certainly gone up now. So like you say, I'm sure it's around about £2.50, £3.
I used to love the programmes. Can I just interrupt? Sorry to interrupt you there, but in the old programmes in the 70s, we used to have the Football League review in the programme as well, and I used to think that was fantastic. I'd go to Birmingham City, I'd buy the programme, and inside the programme you had the Football League review. You open that, the centre spread, and there was always a football team. Always a football team, fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. The next book I've had received again came out last month. Is through Pick Publishing. This is The Director's Tale. This is by Dave Thomas. And it's about, the subtitle is John Bond, Burnley, and the Diaries of Director Derek Gill. So I've not had a chance to read it as of yet, but it does look a fascinating story, and I do recall John Bond, if you remember as well, he had an infamous season there back in the early the 80s. I forget exactly when it was, maybe 82, 83, but I think he had a solitary season in charge. And he spent a lot of money, and he was blamed for wasting a lot of money as well. And they got relegated. And I seem to recall, I remember when he took, I think he was a manager, it might be Shrewsbury. He took them back to Burnley, so he's managing Shrewsbury about 10 years later. He was advised to stay away. So the Burnley fans are never forget him for how he took that, because arguably he was one of the reasons why Burnley collapsed down the leagues and went down to Division 4 very quickly in that period. So
he took Joe Gallagher from West Ham, because Joe had been transferred from Birmingham City to Wolverhampton Wanderers. And he didn't have the best of times at Wolves. Actually, he got sacked for not. They were doing a promo shoot for a new sponsor, and Joe refused to go on there because the players wasn't going to do it. But Dugan come into the dressing room, got into the faces of all the players, and to a man, they got dressed, put the kit on, and Joe said, "Where you going?" And they said, "Well, we're going to do the photo shoot now." And Joe said, "Oh, okay, you carry on, guys." Didn't. And then got ready for training, done the training session. Next day when he turned up for training, said, "You needed in the secretary's office, Joe?" And they said, "Yeah, no problem. Joe, there's your training kit. Okay, you've been sacked." And Joe was sacked for not going on that photo shoot. But he then was struggling to find a club. Now, whether it was the fact that Derek Dugan was so popular and your name gets bandied around and sometimes gets blackballed, we don't know. But it was some time, and then John Lyle was struggling with some injuries, and he phoned up Joe. Joe thought it was the lads having a laugh, but he said, "No, it's John Lyle." Turned up at his house in Sheldon, in Birmingham, and signed Joe for West Ham United. But, with all the players, Billy Bonds and et cetera, Frank Lampard and that, coming back to full fitness, Joe was a little bit surplus to requirements and he wanted a decent contract, and John Bond gave him that at Burnley, so Joe went up there to Burnley Football Club.
Yeah. But I remember reading Brian Laws. He started his career at Burnley, and he was there for a number of years. But I think it was only 2 months in, Bond had got rid of him, and he was sold off to Huddersfield. And Laws then went on to play for Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest, didn't he? So in the top flight. And he went on to some great things. But that book, it's a director's tale. So it's the story of Burnley Football Club in the early 1980s. And it says here, special access to the diaries of director Derek Gill. Dave Thomas, the author, brings you the unvarnished inside story, revealing what went on behind the scenes amid the conflicts of the chairman, John Jackson, and the manager, John Bonds. These were torrid times involving at first a surprise promotion, and then a relegation, and then John Bond's departure, another relegation. So I always like these stories that you probably you'd never know until someone picks it up and tells you exactly what did go on, and some of the stories that went in the boardroom and the toxic mix you can always get. Personalities, let's say. So another book, again, just to shout out, else from Pitch, I've been sent, is Goodison Memories. By Steve.
You pronounce his surname, because I always struggle with Zerich.
I was hoping you'd jump in then.
No, Steve, Steve's a good lad. He follows Everton absolutely everywhere. In fact, recently he'd had a picture taken with Terry Curran, and I was talking to Terry about Steve, and he's a phenomenal Evertonian. I'm hoping, for people like Steve, that Everton stay up. They're a great football club. But it's and he has worked really hard, because I've been in touch with him, and I've put him in touch with a couple of players because a lot of the players have given their memories, and not just Evertonians and Everton players, but players that had played at Goodison and their memories. So that'll be a fantastic read, that will.
No, absolutely. I'm going to say Zocha. It's Z-O-C-E-K. So
it's a funny name. I don't know where he got that from. I mean, it must be some fun. It ain't Scouse, is it, that?
I think it does sound like a Scouse, though. No, it doesn't sound like it. But, he says, actually, he's donating all his royalties from his book, and his previous 2 books as well, and to Everton Former Players Foundation charity. But,
he does a lot.
But I've had a quick glance.
He's a good lad.
Yeah, so I've had a quick glance through it, and the foreword's by John Watson, and it's an interesting read, because it seems to be it's written by a number of players, so whether it be Everton players, but also opposition players, but also TV people. There's famously one bit in it I did have a glance at it, because the commentators box at Goodison is quite famous in terms of, because you have to go up a ladder and then go through the top of the stands there, then go through a hole.
So I wouldn't do that. I don't like heights.
Oh, I know. I wouldn't. I remember I did actually, you might find it somewhere on YouTube. There was definitely someone from, I think it might be Sky or something like that. They did a video of showing you the route up to the gantry. My God, it looks like health and safety nightmare trying to get up there. But what a ground though, isn't it? Goodison Park. If you've ever been there, it's just I know they've moved to a new stadium, don't they? I think it's in time for not next season, but the season after, the 24-25 season. They moved to that new stadium at the banks of the Mersey.
I think they're hoping to. I mean, whether they can still finance it with Usmanov's money not there any longer, who knows? It's mad times, but let's hope that they can find sponsors and people that are going to put money into it, because it does look a fantastic project, doesn't it, that Everton are embarking on.
But it'd be a shame though, wouldn't it, at Goodison Park? Well, because it's just it's one of those iconic grounds, isn't it? And,
it is, absolutely.
I know they're all lovely. These new. I've not been to the new Tottenham ground, but from what I gather, it's incredible. That new stadium, in terms of it's got so many bars and etc. It sounds incredible, but I don't know. There's something about these old grounds as well. It's still, it's a shame that they're going to be replaced over time. But I suppose that's the times, isn't it? things move on.
Sadly, is, yeah, because there's the church, isn't there, inside Goodison, and then the girls come round, don't they? The old, clothes and give out Everton toffees and stuff, and that tradition is all too easily being eroded, and football clubs would stay there, and let's take the seats out, put the terraces back, and get the crowds in there, and do all that you can to stay within your or at your spiritual home, because that's where football was started. And I suppose I'm a bit of a romantic at heart, whether that be football or anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here, absolutely. So it'll be a big moment if they do move from Goodison Park, certainly. That was a few books that I just wanted to shout out. A couple of others I'll give a mention to is ones that come out last month. Was put by David Potter, called Newcastle United: The Great Days, from 1904 to 1911. So, and again, the list of what Newcastle achieved during those early years is, pretty remarkable. And I thought I've got it here because I was going to mention it. The records that they did, they won the league in 3 occasions during the 1900s. So they won in 1905, 1907, 1909. During that, they lost to Aston Villa in the 1905 FA Cup final. They lost again the year after in the 1906, again in 1908, but then won it in 1910. So, I've just rattled off a number of years then where they won the league or in the FA Cup final. So, remarkable, really, isn't it? And with the money that's coming into that club, that will probably come again, won't it now? So times have changed there.
Yeah, possibly. Football is a different ball game, sadly, these days. But Newcastle were one of the great teams in world football back in those days. So a wonderful book. There remembers those halcyon days. Yeah,
absolutely. Sorry, there was another one I was going to mention. Just a couple of those books that's coming out next month. There's one called Brawls, Bribes and Broken Dreams, and it's about how Dundee almost won the European Cup. So this is going back to I hope I get my numbers right. Dates right, 1962.
I was going to say around the early 60s, wouldn't it, with Dundee?
Yeah,
who's written it?
That's it. It's written by Graham Strachan, so he's the group head of Nostalgia at BC Thompson, which writes for online and print titles. It's coming out through Pitch Publishing, this book, so he's written books before as well. He was also part of a filmmaking team behind the Courier's Caniggia documentary, which was made to mark the 20 years since the Argentinian superstar. He signed for Dundee in October 2000. So,
Paddy Barclay's a big Dundee fan, isn't he?
He is, Paddy Barclay, he is. And he does the forward for this book, actually. He does the forward for this one,
Absolutely.
So, he absolutely is. So, they got to the semi-finals of the European Cup in that year. And they lost out to, I'm trying to find it here, I think it might have been Bayern Munich. They won the second leg, 1-0 at Dundee, but they lost the first leg for 5-1.
Yeah, it's a lot to get back, isn't there, and gather from 5-1 defeat in Europe.
Yeah. I'm not too sure about the second leg, so in terms of how competitive it was, but anyway.
I think Coventry City done something similar in the early 70s, went to Bayern and got absolutely stuffed. But then I think they beat them back at Highfield Road 2-1. But the damage is done when you've conceded 5 in the first leg. They almost bring over their reserve team, don't they? And it's a little bit of a training session for them. There's not many teams against crack sides that can get 5 goals back.
Yeah, that's it. So it was Milan, actually. I've just found it here. So Milan beat them 5-1 in that first leg in the San Siro. And it was Gilzean that scored the winner for Dundee, Alan Gilzean, in the 81st minute. So, the Scottish striker. Next month as well, it's actually due to come out next month, but it's actually moved to September, but I'll still give it a mention. It links into what we were talking about earlier. Is Hispania 82, A Hazy Shade of Summer by the great Stuart Horsfield, who wrote the fabulous Brazil at 82. That came out a couple of years back now, which is incredible. But España 92, tells the captivating story of the 82 World Cup. And as we talked about earlier, some of the greatest players in the world played in that tournament. Zico, Maradona, obviously, he came onto the stage in 82. Platini, did he play that year as well?
Platini would have played 82, I'm sure he would have. Yeah,
that's it. So that comes.
It was the year of Paolo Rossi, wasn't it, when he scored those? He scored a hat-trick, didn't he, against Brazil when Italy? I think Italy had pretty much drawn all their group games 0-0 and qualified, and then played Brazil, and it was one of the games of not just the 82 World Cup, but the World Cup. But Brazil were they were the poster boys. They were fantastic. They'd ripped teams to pieces, but then they played Italy.
Yeah, and if there's anyone out there, any kids that wants to know how to celebrate a goal, just go to YouTube and type in Marco Tandelli.
Doing bonkers,
they were absolutely mad, didn't they? The passion in his face is incredible, isn't it? I can't think of many celebrations quite like that.
No, I don't think you can, no. I mean,
iconic, to say the least. You certainly can't with VAR, because VAR nowadays, you're not too sure if you can celebrate, but there you go.
Imagine that with Tardelli and the rules out with VAR. He'd have probably smashed the television setting, because he was. In fact, the only other goal I remember being celebrated with more vigour and passion was Diego Armando Maradona when he scored. I think it was the fourth goal against Greece in the World Cup, and he come to the camera, and I thought, blimey, he looks as though he's on drugs.
He was.
And he was.
He was.
But
that was 94, wasn't it? USA 94.
Yeah. Blimey, I mean, Maradona then. Oh, grief.
And that segues into another book to mention that is coming out in May, so by Stephen Scragg. So it's In the Heat of the Midday Sun.
Yes.
And it's the story of the 1986 World Cup, which, of course, Diego Maradona is, obviously rightly known for. So
that's Terry Butcher about Maradona in '86. He's a big fan.
he is, isn't he? Steve Hodges as well, isn't he?
They love. Yeah, they love Steve Hodge. Them players of '86, they love Steve Hodge. But Terry, I went to see Terry Butcher a couple of weeks ago now at the sports bar in Wollaston, the Britannia Sports Bar. Wow. And I go there quite a lot. Andy Blair does the hosting. I sit down and have my tea with Andy, and Terry was there that night, so we were having a chat previously. But then when he was talking about 1986, I promise you, he's no fan of Maradona. No fan. And I asked him, I said, because, we could ask a couple of questions, and the question I always like to ask on my podcast, my 70s podcast, is, if you could replay any game that you played in, what game would you replay? Straight away, Butch said 86, that bastard Maradona.
Again, I think of Barry Davies. He was doing the commentary, wasn't he? And he said, when obviously he scored that second goal, he's got Burgacharo to his left, and I can't remember exactly the words he said. But he said after it went in, he said, there's no denying that second goal. There might have been controversy over the first goal, but you can't deny his brilliance for his second.
But you see, the thing is, with that first goal there, I mean, how he actually beats Peter Shilton, who Shilton's about a foot bigger, in the air. He's put his arm. I mean, I'll promise you now, if Terry Butcher would have been in goal, he would have smashed Maradona. He would have took him out because he'd have just punched him. I mean, Shilton, I don't know what Shilton was doing, but without a doubt, listening to Terry, being in Terry's company, he would have took Maradona's head off. And if he could have, he took his legs out as well.
Yeah, it's an amazing jump because, as you probably imagine, he would be on the front of that cover of that book, and it is on the front. Diego Maradona. You see the way he's actually, I'm looking at it now, for a little small man, he's got an incredible leap.
Oh,
to get up above Shilton. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, timing.
It reminds me of Cristiano Ronaldo in modern day, isn't he? He can jump incredible heights.
You've seen him after the game, Butch, and he looked at Maradona and said, in no uncertain terms, what was it? And Maradona actually pointed to his head. And I think if he'd have pointed to his hand, Butcher would have took him out there and then. Terry was an absolute warrior.
Yeah. But Steve Hodges, he's put that to his, because he took his shirt, didn't he, after the game, Maradona's shirt.
That was more luck than judgment.
Yeah, but I think it's gone up for auction. I'm not sure if the auction happened, but I think it was put on initially $4 million was the holding, wasn't it? So I need to catch up what's happened with that. But it's coming out, that's coming out in a couple of weeks' time. Stephen Scragg, again, one of the great writers from the Sunday Times, who's wrote a number of brilliant books, the trilogy of European football, where the cool kids hung out, and the undisputed champions of Europe, and Frozen in Time. So, that's another great book that's coming out in May. Got some great books coming up.
We certainly have. Have you got anything else, sir? Because I've exhausted my capabilities. I love listening to your recommendations, and I'm sure that you will be recommending for the next Current View next week. I usually post to you on a Sunday. I think, what's Gabbie doing this on a Sunday for? But I like to get things done early because we do the podcast on a Tuesday evening, all being well. This week, Terry wasn't very well because he'd received an induction into the Hall of Fame with the Sheffield Star, the local paper up there in Sheffield. Yeah, he ended up in a casino, and TC doesn't usually drink. But I was
going to say he doesn't drink.
He had a monster of hangovers the day after he phoned me. He says, I can't do it, I'm terrible. So we've done it on the Thursday. But no, Terry never drinks. I mean, when he played all through his career, it was Coke that he drunk. He didn't. But he would have a couple occasionally. But when you don't drink, it really hits you. And Big Ron was up there, and he can drink with the best of them.
Thanks for reminding me, because there is one book I did want to give a shout out just before we wrap up, Paul. There's one I wanted to mention. It's important to do because it's by a guy called Johnny Brick, who does provide for me and myfootballbooks.com a number of reviews for book reviews. He's someone I engaged with in the early days. He's the founder of another great Twitter site, which I recommend you go out there and have a look. It's called the Football Library, and that's Johnny Brick. And he's got a book coming out next week, and it's called From Kids to Champions. It's a history of the FA Youth Cup. That's been going since 1952. So, which has showcased future stars, including Matt Busby's legendary babes. So, and the Youth Cup final itself comes out. Is in a couple of weeks' time, and it's between Manchester United and my club, Nottingham Forest. And it's going to be played at Old Trafford. So it's the first time Nottingham Forest have ever made the FA Youth Cup final. And it's the first time for Manchester United, I think, for quite some time as well. So, so Johnny Brick's book's coming out, and From Kids to Champions, the history of the FA Youth Cup. Reading the summary here. So, From Kids to Champions tells the stories of the players who didn't make it to the top level or left the game disillusioned, along with those important coaches and academy directors. These men are always first with thanks when the kids become champions. So we can all we all know the great footballers that come through the youth level, but there's so many footballers that you've never heard of, you never will hear of, that sadly never make it. That's a really interesting book. So give it a shout out to Johnny there and his book coming out again by Fitz Publishing.
I'd like to podcast with him regarding that book. I mean, one of my earliest football memories was in 1972 when Birmingham City played against Aston Villa. We played a moment away, or I think we drew. So the game, I'm not too sure whether the first game was at Villa Park, the replay was at St Andrews, or St Andrews then Villa Park, but it was Brian Little versus Trevor Francis. And I've done a podcast with Browne, and we spoke about that. And Browne recalls that game very, very fondly, because he had played for Aston Villa for the first team, but he did play in the Youth Cup game, and Villa went on and beat Liverpool in the final in '72. But that was Trevor Francis versus Brian Little, and I said to Brian, in all my time in Birmingham, watching and loving football, we've never had two special players from each team going head to head as kids and growing up and playing for the first team. And I think that there was, over the two games, probably over 40,000 to watch those both games.
Wow.
I think Kenny played, Joe would have played, Trevor played, Brian played, Bobby McDonald. There was some fantastic players on both sides.
Well, you know the FA Youth Cup in a couple of weeks' time, as I say, between Manchester United and Forest. The tickets have already sold over 40,000 for that. It's been played at Old Trafford.
Yeah, phenomenal.
So just by coincidence, it's at Man United's ground. But I know Nottingham Forest have already sold, I think, it's in excess of 4,500 tickets already for the away section. They are selling them for, I think it's about £1 a ticket, so obviously it's very cheap, but still. Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
Well, I should be watching that game and supporting Forest. I hope Forest win. I hope, doing the podcast, as you know, both me and Terry being a former player of Nottingham Forest, of course, we both hope that Forest get promoted. I'm a big fan of Steve Cooper. Terry was telling me years ago about this fella that used to be one of the managers of Liverpool's academy, and then managed England and won the World Cup, manager at Swansea. I think that he's a fantastic manager that's embraced the spirit of Clough, and I think that Nottingham Forest are a club really on the front foot, and you look at the City ground, and TC said to me, I've never seen days like that, even under Brian. It wasn't like that, and it really is at the moment a special club, and I think a special man that's created that.
Yeah, and he's done completely different to, we've gone now, I was looking at the records now, we've been out in the Premier League for 23 years, we're on our 21st manager, so Steve Cooper is the 21st, the previous 20, and even Chris Hughton, the latest one, for whatever reason, didn't want to, and really purposely didn't want to embrace the history of the club. Really. But Steve Cooper was the absolute opposite. Straight away, he wanted to get everyone involved. John Robertson, John McGovern. John McGovern has been around the club for quite some time, etc. But he wanted to make sure, we absolutely embrace the history, and that's important. We should do. And also the CEO that's been brought in. His name escapes me, but he's a young man that's come over from America. He's just embraced youth, focusing on the youth, etc. And you've seen it. And the fact that we're doing so well, perhaps going into the Premier League this season, and we've got to the Youth Cup final, just shows you to just get everything right, concentrate on the right things, get the club running correctly. Every club can do it. It's just going to get the right ingredients all together. But he's doing great stuff, Steve Cooper.
Absolutely.
Really
Swansea, then Bournemouth away, and then Hull City at home. I think Hull City, it might have been Brian's first game against Hull City. I know that Hull City was a game that Forest played in the early days of Brian Clough, when they were just above the drop zone in the which is now the Championship, which is the level that they are now. But Forest, if the results go their way, will get automatically promoted, and I really hope that they do, because the City Ground is a special place, and Forest are a special football club.
Yeah, it's been a special season, so the atmosphere has been great this season. So I'll probably regret it if we did get promoted to the Premier League, because then we'll start getting thrashed every
well, that
every
can
season,
happen,
which is sad.
But I look at some of the players,
haven't they?
I look at some of the players and I think, you know what? I'd like to see some of them Forest players, them young players, with a little bit of experience and a good manager, going up there and playing football the way that they've been playing, and the way that Brian preached the passing game. And Stevie Cooper is a disciple of Brian Clough and a throwback. So good luck to Nottingham Forest. I'm fully behind you, and hope to see you in the Premier League next season.
Excellent. No, great stuff. Thank you. So, no, linking it back to that book, so the Youth Cup. So, be an interesting read, that one, definitely. So, a different name on the trophy, so hopefully on that one as well.
Absolutely. So keep promoting these football books, Andy. We will reconvene
Likewise.
in another 4 weeks' time and giving another bout of football book reviews and promotions, etc., etc. And it'd just be in time for people to start going on the summer holidays and sitting around the pool and having a little bit of spare time, a few sangrias and pina coladas and beers, and reading about the beautiful game. So thanks for listening, guys, and happy reading.
Excellent. Happy reading all. And thanks again, Paul. Take care.
Cheers, pal. Speak soon.
All the best, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
As dawn broke over the seven seas, the pirates of the Crimson Galleon set sail for adventure. But there was one problem. Paperwork. Mountains of it. Filing, invoices, you name it.
This work ain't fit for a pirate.
Luckily, their captain had an idea. She used the smart buying tools on Amazon Business, so they could work more efficiently and get back to doing what they do best. I know, right? Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.